Hello and good morning, everyone. This is Bogdan Cuzilo. Welcome to our TriStar webinar series. We'll get started in just a minute here. I'll allow people to join before we begin here just for another minute or so. While we're waiting, for those of you who may have questions during this webinar, there is a question message area in your GoToMeeting toolbar, so feel free to post any questions and I'll try to get to as many as I can. If we don't have time to get through all of them, I will I will respond to your questions hopefully by email if you provided that. This webinar will also be recorded, so it will be on our website, www.tristar.com, anytime, probably later today or very early tomorrow, so you can use it to play back the content or show your colleagues if you wish. So today what we're going to be doing is talking about how we can automate some of the repetitive tasks that occur between PDM systems or PLM systems like Windchill and other systems, such common ones being ERP. Okay, so let's get started. I'll kind of go through some of my content here first and just give you a quick snapshot of what some of this could look like in Windchill. So we're going to be talking about, especially when we're passing information between systems, how can we automate how that information is generated and the type of information that we're passing back and forth. We're also going to take a look at some of the TriStar apps that are used to automate some of this. One being content export. A lot of people also, for the majority of our customers, use things like Excel files to compare BOMs between different systems. So if you do have a BOM inside of Windchill, whether it's a CAD BOM or a Windchill part BOM, and another BOM in, for example, the ERP system, most of the time companies either use an Excel file or log into both systems to do that comparison. There's a nice tool, a nice app that allows you to compare information, even flatten out your BOMs to compare them together. And this could also be extended to look into and extract BOM information out of other systems, things like ERP systems or MRP systems. Now we're going to talk about specifically about how some of our customers are integrating with their ERP systems. What are the benefits of doing that? How can we enable this in your environment? What is the infrastructure that we use? What are the options? What kind of information can we exchange between those systems? What type of data flow is occurring between those systems? And then we'll get to some questions and answers on these topics. So this is really meant just for this brief webinar time here today, just a quick introduction to some of these. If you have further interest in kind of investigating what type of connections can occur in your environment, can we automate some of the manual steps of passing data between systems or information or processes, by all means let us know. We'll be happy to work with you to first educate you on what's possible, and second to investigate what would be the effort, what type of benefits would you gain in doing that in your environment. Okay, so let's get into the content. So today on the market there's really different systems for product development data, primarily the PLM engineering, kind of upfront before items get to items get released to manufacturing. PLM systems, PDMs being a subset of that, product data management, PLM, product lifecycle management. And then most companies have some type of ERP system in place, whether that's from one of the main ERP vendors or some custom developed system that works in your type of business. And with Windchill, not necessarily Windchill 11, but Windchill in general, we can actually communicate with a lot of systems. So there sometimes is overlap between those systems, especially for some of the processes around supplier management, BOM management, configuration management, more of the product configuration management. And really, the systems are necessary in most companies as companies grow, because one system will not handle everything for you. In the future, they may consolidate, but today PLM kind of maintains the what and how to build a product or a component for a project, and then ERP systems kind of maintain the scheduling, the costing, the resources required to where and when to build that component. So Windchill can typically house things like CAD data, documents, bills of material in the planning phase, configurations of those parts or those BOMs, change management information, project information, with other modules to enable things like process plan management operations tied to a router or a work instruction generated from that. Those items can be in PLM, they can be in ERP, but if they are in one system or the other, sometimes it's valuable to push that information from one to the other. So if you're doing some planning information for manufacturing in PLM, that needs to come across to ERP, right? Material needs to get ordered. Schedules need to be created, and the ERP system will typically manage things like the cost, the financials, inventory items, purchasing, ordering information, and even some manufacturing. Depending on your ERP system, how much manufacturing, scheduling modules it has, maybe some of those items. And some companies also use more of like execution systems, MES systems, to kind of track production, to track parts going off the assembly line and statistics on those. So all these systems really are communicating together in your environment today. Just some of those processes are maybe disconnected and manual. They may work, but there definitely is opportunities to provide or create more efficiencies by kind of streamlining the communication between those systems, especially when there's a change. So having a change impact, for example, items out of those systems, and have that visual is pretty important. So if there's a change, ideally we would like to have data extracted out of those systems so people can examine the true impact of that change and enable not only engineering change but more of the enterprise change. So how do we get data? What can we do to synchronize that information between PLM and ERP? So typically there's going to be one system that's going to be the master for a certain functionality, right? So if you're managing your BOMs today in PLM, then they're going to be managed there until they're ready for release into ERP or some type of pre-release phase. If you're managing your BOMs today in ERP and just managing CAD information in PLM, the BOM information from CAD will need to get into ERP in some form and then added onto or configured there for manufacturing purposes. So the part records and the structures or the BOM structures need to get passed between one system and the next. A lot of companies are doing change management in PLM. To do true change management, sometimes I need to understand for disposition how many of those items I have in inventory on order, and how much do they cost. I can't just scrap an item if the associated costs, not only the material cost, but the associated costs with that part, either reworking or scrapping it, will kind of prevent me from doing that. So I need to understand that information from those systems. So typically customers will want to get that information as quickly as possible. Today you have to log into each system to see that. So what some of the questions can occur between the systems such that how do we synchronize our part numbers? How do we pull data and push data from one system to the next? And what happens when changes occur? What do I have to do in each system? So definitely we can automate that information, and we'll see how that happens, and what type of information we can automate between those two systems later in my presentation. So one of the things that's typically pushed across from Windchill to other systems is the drawing, right? The drawing in the form typically of a PDF. So how can we, and what the process today is, most engineering users will create a PDF and then just store it in the network folder or email it to somebody, maybe a document control person in that role, and they'll put it into a system where the ERP system, where the ERP can find it or users can find it. And then if there's a change, a revision change, that needs to happen again, and obviously that's very manual, error prone. Obviously if you have a good process, it will work. But what if that person's away for the day? It's reliant on people's knowledge and very manual processes. So Windchill introduced something called additional files that you can generate. So whenever a CAD user checks in a drawing into Windchill, and this could come from Creo, this could come from the other CAD supported systems like SolidWorks, CATIA, NX, Inventor, that kind of plug into Windchill. And Windchill, through the visualization, typically called the CAD worker, can actually create those additional files from the source. So from the 2D files, like the drawings, we can create things like PDFs, DXFs. It's up to the company to decide what they're creating. These files can also be created during a life cycle change or a life cycle state change. So if something gets released in Windchill, automatically the files are created. But if it's not released, those files are not created. Once these files are in Windchill and linked to that design, whenever there's a revision change or iteration change to that drawing, to that part, Windchill will automatically remove the previous PDF attached and upload a new one to the new rev. Right? So that PDF, that step file that I just filed, is always synchronized with the file that I'm looking at. And I can get to those files inside of Windchill. It's a few picks and clicks out of the box to get to those. Sometimes companies want to put those files out of Windchill somewhere. So one of the things that we can enable is through the content export app, is to have these files be either manually or automatically exported out of Windchill to other locations, right? So if it's a network folder, we can have this PDF, for example, or this DXF or step file be put into those other folders whenever there's some type of a workflow activity or a user decides that it's time to do that by manually launching a command in Windchill. Right, so that kind of offloads the PDF generation, the manual movement of files by users from one system to the next. Now, some users will decide that this PDF should remain in Windchill. So how do I access this PDF from other systems? Like if I go into my ERP system, how do I access this PDF inside of Windchill instead? So we do this by an app called the Portal. This generates a consistent URL for people to have either a hyperlink in the ERP system that will always point to the latest PDF or latest file inside of Windchill, or this will be used as a lightweight interface for those people who don't want to go into ERP but just want to access these PDFs out of Windchill. So this enables the the hyperlink to be passed only into ERP systems instead of a physical file. Those physical files can be stored inside of Windchill. Sometimes you don't want to have a PDF repository on the network folder because that's again another place to manage files that that needs to be maintained. So depending on the maturity and what type of integrations that that you have in your environment, we can start with the PDF on the network folder, but then kind of move away from those and just keep those in Windchill. Now those are just files. A lot of companies are also passing bills of materials or part numbers between two systems. So we can also enable things like BOM Compare inside of Windchill. This BOM Compare is another app that allows me to flatten out BOMs for, depending how you put them into ERP systems, I can flatten them out first and compare the items either inside of Windchill, or if I have this ERP integration, I can pull that BOM information at the various levels from ERP systems, right? So before I do any kind of push, whoever's validating this push can launch this BOM Compare app, and then this is again allowing me to take a look at, in side-by-side columns, what is contained, what the quantities are, what type of attributes I'm interested in, just to make sure that those items either exist or I'm synchronizing it properly between the two systems. So again, this could be another tool that instead of logging into Windchill, looking at a BOM, and then logging into ERP, looking at a BOM, and then using either Excel or on-screen comparison between the two, figuring out what's changed, I can kind of automate that process and run this BOM Compare in one place. So this will allow me to kind of validate those two BOMs or structures in those two systems. So in terms of system connectivity, we talked about passing files, passing BOM information. What things can we do to pass between Windchill and ERP? Here's an example showing just one ERP called SAP, but that's not exclusive to that. So typically the information that gets passed between the systems and that integration can happen either unidirectionally or bidirectionally. We have customers pulling part numbers from ERP systems into Windchill. We have, so that would be a push from ERP to Windchill. We have customers who just put information from Windchill into ERP. Either way, there are different levels of integration. And some companies will start at the basic level, and then once the process is validated, they will then move on to the more automated type of integrations. So we can either go through a file where it's properly formatted from Windchill, into or have it be ready for ERP import, or we can go through and develop a connection through a web service, which is a built-in API in Windchill, and most modern ERP systems have web service functionality in their APIs as well, and have, instead of a physical file, but just have the information records being written after validation from Windchill to ERP. There are several, on the technical side, there's several technologies that, Windchill and ERP systems will use. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. But this allows, through those technologies, such as SOAP and RESTful, this allows us to transfer over part numbers, attribute values on those parts, allows us to do some processing, so we can kind of limit minimum and maximum file sizes to be passed, or BOM structures. If it's a more complex custom product, you might not want to push it into ERP without further validation. So there could be a flag that says, well, if this type of BOM is being pushed, let's have a validation phase. Maybe I don't want to write this into ERP before it gets further validated. So those could be, kind of checks and balances between the systems if you want to automate that information. We can also pass things like documents from Windchill to ERP systems. So PDFs being one, but other documents for packages, for transmittals that need to be put into not only ERP but other portals. SharePoint, for example, being a common one used in companies. We can also determine what gets passed to Windchill from ERP systems. So if I'm doing ECN or ECR in Windchill, I might want to know inventories or items, costs, or other process costs, manufacturing costs from ERP. So we can also populate those fields on that ECR, ECN, and Windchill from ERP systems. So there's various calls available to kind of push that type of information from Windchill to ERP systems. In terms of a simple file push, will also kind of format that file for your ERP system. Obviously we'll need to understand your fields that you're using. The typical XML output from Windchill is not applicable because that's not formatted properly for ERP systems. So we'll format it properly using our ERP app to make sure that when someone is importing that file into ERP, or the process is automated upon import, the format is proper for ERP system to understand that. So what I want to do is just kind of get into the system and show you some examples. So one example could be, if I go into my ERP system, I might have just a hyperlink to a file, right? So this is a fictitious system that I created here, but in there's a link to a drawing or a PDF. So in the ERP system, I can pass a hyperlink to it. When I click on that hyperlink, this will prompt me, because that PDF is in Windchill, right? So this will prompt me to log in to my Windchill system if I'm not already logged in. And instead of going into the Windchill page directly, I'm going into just my out-of-the-box portal, where I have the ability to look at that drawing. I also have the ability to download the PDF or the DXF file of that drawing, right? So very simple interface. Now this portal kind of came up. If I wanted the PDF directly, this would not come up and the PDF would just download. But that would be directly coming out of Windchill. So if I click on the PDF, I can just, as a user, I don't need to go into Windchill. I don't need to understand Windchill, but I know that PDF I need. So if I have access to it, I can then download it. Now this is a simple PDF. Now, if I do have access to Windchill itself, I will have access to also Windchill functionality. So if I'm a Windchill user, I can open the viewer, Creo View, and then I can launch that that drawing inside of Creo View instead. So um, I can enable things like markups. I can do things like measurements on that drawing if I need to. So this opens up Creo View directly, and this document comes out of Windchill directly. But then I can do markups on it, right? Just like I can in Windchill by providing a toolbar for markups within Creo View on that. So I have access to this. I also have access to the part number that this drawing is related to. So I can show things like changes, problem reports, maybe reference documents to this part number. So this is an assembly, so I might want to get access to also assembly inspections, for example, or other things. So if I want to download that document or take a look at it, I can open it in the new tab or download it that way directly. In my case, I don't have this working. Just as an example, that would download that document as well. So that's a relationship within the Windchill system. So there's a WT part, and there's some documents attached to that WT part, as well as this part and the Creo CAD drawing. Right? But everything is all together for me. I don't need to navigate the Windchill system to look at that. And I can get directly to that just from my ERP portal. So all I'm passing is just the hyperlinks back into Windchill. And if someone revises this drawing to 1.8 and becomes 1.9 or version 2, Rev 2, this will always, out of my ERP system, this will always work and point to that specific latest one. Most of the time people in ERP are just interested to look at the latest, unless they have a need to look at previous versions. They'll maybe go back to engineering and pull those up. So that's one example. Another example is if I actually go into the Windchill system, is to kind of take a look at those other tools such as the BOM Compare. So if I go into my, and I'll just navigate maybe to one of my parts here, and I'll use the same one. I'll use the one that part number that I took out of ERP, that 3348 06390. Okay, so this was the part. So if I go to that component, I have the option to compare BOMs together. So I have the BOM Compare app, kind of in my Compare toolbar. I can put this option anywhere I want in Windchill. In my case, I have this BOM Compare window here. So now let's say, for example, I am working in Windchill, or I do have some kind of ECN that I'm working on this. So I have the B version of this BOM that I'm looking at. But I want to understand, before I push it into ERP, maybe I want to understand the ERP version of that BOM. So here it's showing me the BOM itself, the BOM components. It's showing me, the levels of each of these, and I can kind of make my screen a bit bigger when I do this. So let me search for the BOM to compare to. So in my case, I could have this be programmed such that it automatically goes to ERP and finds the latest, version of this part number, and it kind of overlays them side by side. I can also go in here and compare to previous Windchill versions. So to compare. So there's a 1.8 that was released. I'll just compare it to that one. So this one kind of puts the BOMs side by side, and it shows me the differences between either attributes or items. So I can kind of select the attributes that I'm comparing between the two. So far I just have the following plus I added material as a column between the two. I can, for example, filter these to to add comparison criterias. So for example, in Windchill, I can kind of look at as stored instead of latest. I can do baselines, effectivity values, and so on. This is very similar to what you can do in Windchill, except that I can use the ERP version or other versions that exist in other systems of this BOM instead of only content within Windchill. Now, in my case, I'm not running an ERP system, so I'm just showing content within Windchill. So in my case, these two BOMs look almost identical. There doesn't seem to be any changes. If I select the A version of this BOM, I'll see what changes exist there, if any. Okay, so it looks like if I show items that have been changed, there's nothing. So all these items pretty much look the same at all the levels. And of course, I can also export these BOMs into an Excel file from here. So I can, kind of still run comparisons. And I'm not sure what this format is in my case, but I can export this into a format, and in this case is a CSV, so Excel, I had to go back to, there could be an Excel format here as well. But then I can use Excel to do other things that you may not do in this app. But that's one application called the BOM Compare that could be either executed from within Windchill, or it could be executed directly from a workflow. Right? So if you have an ECN or ECR that you get a task for, you can then run a BOM Compare as a button within that ECR or ECN, as an example. So those were, some examples of, passing information, connecting the systems together, possibilities between Windchill and ERP. It doesn't really matter what ERP system it is. We've integrated into a lot of the common ones. Unless your system is running on a green screen terminal and it's from the 1980s, there's maybe nothing we can do. But at least we can prepare a load file that can be extracted out of Windchill either through a workflow or through a button that minimizes people creating Excel files and manipulating those from multiple systems before it gets into ERP systems. Okay, so that concludes my presentation for today. If there's any questions, let me know in the chat window. I'll be happy to answer any of those that you may have. Okay, if there's I don't see any questions in the chat box. If you do have any questions following this, feel free to contact your sales representative at TriStar, or have a look at our TriStar website. We do have this information, more information about these apps, more information about our ERP capabilities on there, and let us know if you have any more information. And again, this webinar will be recorded. It is being recorded and will be put on our website shortly for playback. Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending today, and hopefully you found this information useful. If you have additional suggestions for future webinar topics that you'd like to see in Windchill, also feel free to complete our survey on surveymonkey.com. You should have a link in your webinar, your invitation, and we'll be happy to go into other deep dives in other areas of this functionality. So thank you everyone, and have a great day.